They say justice has a way of catching up with everyone, but what happens when the tables turn on those who are supposed to uphold it? In today's story, a former cop, someone who knows the system inside and out, finds themselves face to face with a group of corrupt officers. It all starts with a simple request, but things take an unexpected turn when the officers are challenged on their authority. What unfolds next is an unforgettable walk of shame that tests their patience, their professionalism, and their willingness to follow the very rules they enforce. This isn't just about standing up to corruption. It's about holding power accountable and watching how it crumbles under the weight of truth. Stick around as we dive into this intense and eye-opening encounter that leaves one question hanging in the air. When those in power are exposed, how far will they go to avoid accountability? The encounter began like any other, a routine stop, nothing out of the ordinary at first glance. But as the former cop, now just an everyday citizen, calmly questioned the officers, cracks started to show. Simple questions about procedure and rights were met with deflection, irritation, and even silence. It was clear that something wasn't adding up, and the tension in the air was undeniable. This wasn't the former cop's first rodeo. Years in law enforcement had taught them not just the rules, but the subtle signs of when those rules were being bent or outright broken. The officers, who initially seemed confident in their authority, began to falter under the scrutiny. Their discomfort was palpable, but instead of admitting fault, they doubled down, making things even more suspicious. With every unanswered question and evasive response, the sense of unease grew. What were they trying to hide? And how far would they go to keep it hidden? As the conversation dragged on, the former cop could see the cracks in their facade widening. One officer shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact, while another grew visibly defensive, raising his voice to deflect attention. It was almost too familiar, a tactic used to intimidate and regain control. But this time, it wasn't working. The former cop remained calm, every question deliberate, every pause amplifying the officer's unease. A small crowd had started to gather at a distance, drawn by the escalating tension. Whispers and curious glances added a new layer of pressure. The officers, now clearly aware of the onlookers, began fumbling over their words. It wasn't just about a badge anymore. It was about credibility, reputation, and power slipping through their fingers. Meanwhile, the former cop's quiet confidence painted a stark contrast. They weren't just asking questions. They were exposing a system built on unchecked authority. What would happen if the truth they were inching toward finally came to light? The former cop knew they were getting close to something bigger than just a mishandled stop. The questions, though simple on the surface, were clearly hitting nerves. One officer stepped away, pretending to check something on his radio, while another tried to redirect the conversation with vague excuses. It was a classic move: stall and hope the pressure fades. But the crowd wasn't losing interest, it was growing. Phones were out, recording every word, every expression. This was no longer a private moment, it was accountability on display. The former cop's experience told them this was more than incompetence. There was something deeper, a reason for the evasion. Was it about protecting themselves or someone higher up the chain? The officer's silence spoke volumes, their authority shrinking with every unanswered question. The tension reached its peak when the former cop calmly asked a final question, one that couldn't be dodged. The officers froze, their faces betraying a mix of panic and frustration. The truth felt so close you could almost touch it, but what would happen next? Would they crack, or would they dig in even further? Just when it seemed the tension couldn't get any higher, an unexpected twist changed everything. A plainclothes man emerged from a nearby car, flashing a badge that identified him as a superior officer. His presence wasn't reassuring, It only deepened the mystery. The former cop recognized the look on his face. Controlled, calculated, but with a trace of nervous energy beneath the surface. This wasn't someone stepping in to defuse the situation. This was damage control. The superior officer attempted to take charge, directing the other officers to step aside and addressing the former cop with a forced calmness. But the questions didn't stop. Instead, they shifted focus. The former cop now aimed their inquiries at this new figure, digging into his involvement and authority. It became clear that this wasn't a routine stop gone wrong. It was a tangled web of decisions and cover-ups. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, sensing the shift in power dynamics. The superior officer's responses were smooth but hollow, raising even more suspicion. What was he protecting, and why had he intervened so abruptly? It felt like the story was only beginning to unravel, and the stakes were now higher than ever. The superior officer's attempt to regain control was unraveling as quickly as it began. The former cop's persistence left him with fewer and fewer places to hide, and the crowd's presence made it impossible to simply walk away. Under the pressure of both public scrutiny and sharp, pointed questions, his polished demeanor started to crack. That's when it happened, the slip that changed everything. A simple, careless phrase muttered under his breath hinted at something larger. They weren't supposed to say anything. It was quiet, almost lost in the noise, but the former cop caught it. The crowd, too, began buzzing with speculation. What weren't they supposed to say? And who was pulling the strings? Suddenly, one of the younger officers blurted out a defensive response, inadvertently confirming the existence of a larger cover-up. The superior officer shot him a sharp glare, but it was too late. The truth was out. The stop wasn't about protocol or safety. It was part of a broader effort to shield someone higher up, and now the entire situation was unraveling before their eyes. As the officers scrambled to regain composure, the former cop stood firm, watching the dominoes fall. The twist. This wasn't the first time this superior officer had intervened in questionable circumstances, and now the crowd had the proof they needed to make sure it wouldn't be the last. The balance of power had shifted for good, leaving the corrupt team exposed in the harsh light of accountability. As the dust settled, the truth was undeniable. The crowd, now emboldened by what they had witnessed, began demanding answers. Videos of the encounter were already spreading, ensuring the story wouldn't be buried. The former cop, calm as ever, watched as the once confident officers were left scrambling, their authority crumbling under the weight of their own actions. The superior officer, who had stepped in to take control, now looked exposed and powerless, his attempts to silence the situation backfiring spectacularly. In the end, accountability prevailed. The videos sparked an investigation, and those responsible faced consequences they had long avoided. For the former cop, this wasn't just about one encounter. It was about standing up for what was right and showing the power of persistence and transparency. As the crowd dispersed, one thing was clear. No one is above the law, and the truth has a way of coming to light, no matter how deeply it's buried.